Okay, test on the audio. This is for Danny. Georgie, go ahead.
Test of the audio for Georgie. This is Georgie.
This is audio again for Danny. Who is louder? Who is quieter? Please let us know in the chat. Once again, this is Danny's audio. Georgie, go ahead.
This is Georgie's audio.
Now. Hello, everybody. We are live on YouTube. Georgie, how are you, sir?
Still, we're live and alive still, right?
Well, welcome to the Generative Energy Apocalypse stream. And so very happy for Georgie to be my guest. I'm in like the most uncomfortable chair imaginable, so I'll be probably squirming around this whole time. But Georgie, give us a sense of what life is like at the moment.
I can only speak for DC, but the city is under what is it, like emergency law or something? It's not martial law, but it's still an emergency, a state of emergency, and all the schools and daycares and public facilities are closed, like gyms, bars, restaurants, libraries, pretty much any other facility you can think of that the public would use is also closed. So for people like me, you're basically stuck at home. I mean, it's not a mandatory quarantine, but there's visibly less people, fewer people on the streets, and when you're walking around, especially if they see you with children, police would approach you, and I don't want to say they'll harass you, but they'll say like, "Where are you going? Why? Are you aware of the virus going around? And you're not wearing masks. The children are not wearing masks. Why aren't you home?" So situation like that. So basically, for most people, I'm guessing they're stuck at home, and they're working from home. And the ones that have children, they're working from home, and their children are at home 24/7, mostly. Because also the buildings, if you live in a house, that's one situation. But if you most people in the city live in these apartment buildings, and the apartment buildings have closed off all the amenities. So there are no like playrooms for kids, because there are, but they're closed. Gyms are closed. Common rooms are closed. So you basically can only pick up your mail, and then you have to go to your apartment, and that's pretty much it. So it's basically, whoever has family and children, you're stuck at home, your children at home, and you have to work. and this goes on 7 days a week, so it's not fun. I just don't see how this can go on for another 2-3 weeks, maybe 2 weeks tops. But after that, you're gonna start seeing some first subdued social unrest, and then it's probably going to start spilling over on the streets. So I live in an apartment building. I have friends who live in other apartment buildings. I mean, if people cannot go out, or are scared to the point that they don't want to go out, and they're stuck in their apartments, most of the time, things start, taking a turn for the bad. People drink, do drugs, fight, initially verbally, then physically. I mean, in our apartment building, I've never seen the police roam the hallways, so often. Every day, I get out of the apartment. We live on the fourth floor. I see cops every day, and they're usually being called for noise violations. And a few times they actually took people out in handcuffs. I've never seen that happen before. And you can hear. I mean, basically, like our apartment is facing the inner courtyard, and you can hear people fighting all the time. This had not happened before. Of course, there's also the financial situation. Some people are getting laid off. Other people, are being told they're getting their pay reduced. So I don't think this. I mean, clearly not a good situation. But I think the signs that I'm seeing are that the people are more worried about the financial ramification, and the fact that their, freedom of movement is being is impeded, is hindered, and they're not worried so much about the virus. Even though once you start going out into the stores and interacting with other people, then you do run into some of the more fanatical ones that are, basically like they're wearing their highly scientific masks that you probably, NASA would be envious and probably would want a mask or two for their team going to the moon. And they're wearing gloves and whatnot. Keep in mind, most of the store staff is not wearing neither masks nor gloves. I mean, maybe they should, but I'm saying that they're not. And at least they're not giving off the vibe of, being panicked or being afraid, which is probably a good thing. But the people, the clients there are, and they're actually, lashing out at others, including the staff and also other clients, that we are not taking this as seriously as this should be. So so basically we have now this cohort of people splitting into two groups: the fanatics, and I don't want to call them fanatics, but the doomers, for lack of a better word, and then the people who just want to go on with their lives. It's the doomers that are kind of like attacking the others and saying like, you're not taking this seriously. But more often than not, if you talk to the doomers, the ones who want to be talked to, you'll find out that there's something else going on that's causing this aggressiveness. It's usually like I said, problems at home, problems at work. It's not really the virus.
Well, it's funny to compare and contrast like the divisiveness of politics versus the idea that somebody has like a black plague disease that you could possibly get and then spread to your loved ones. And so if you really think about it, like anybody who's in the so-called conspiracy, I think it's reality more so minded. It's like really the perfect thing to cause total like social chaos, I think. And I'm not saying it's planned or whatever. It doesn't even matter, or it does matter, but it's just like the chaos that it creates between individuals is insane. I was also reflecting, like before we talked to Ray, that was like coronavirus was happening, but not even close to the extent that it is now, And I remember thinking before our show with Ray, like I didn't even want to bring it up because I thought it was such like a non-story. But a lot of the things you asked him were totally relevant to like what happened a few days later. And so, man, yeah, okay, so I'll tell a quick story. Like I was in Bangkok and my girlfriend, she went back to like her hometown. It's called, anybody's Thai in the audience, I apologize, but it's called like Pichit. And she left and she's like, Danny, you should really leave Bangkok. And I was like, no, I have an Airbnb. I don't want to like double pay for another room somewhere. And it's like comfortable here because there's a grocery store like right so close. I could walk there, and that's like a major thing for me to do all the time is to go to the grocery store. And so I was like, no, I'll meet you after the 31st, and I'm just gonna stay here and kind of ride it out. And she texted me like probably just a few days ago, and she was like, or on the 25th, no, maybe the 24th. And she was like, hey, Bangkok is closing down on the 26th. You should leave. You should like move your train ticket to tomorrow. but I'm looking around me, and I'm in an Airbnb I've been living in for like 2 months. And so you can just imagine, like, I'm like totally moved in, and I'm like, oh my God, I have to leave on a train. I'm in a place called Pitsanaluk or somewhere now. It's like right above Peachit, and so it's kind of funny, like getting all my things together and like escaping Bangkok. And then when I got here, the next day Bangkok closed down and you couldn't travel out of there. So I was actually pretty thankful for her giving me the heads up. But man, yeah, this is I'd be interested in people's stories, but this is definitely unprecedented. You know, like somebody I really respect. Her name is Whitney Webb, and she was talking about how we lost a bunch of liberties after 9/11, and you could just imagine what this is due. If this is kind of like a power grab for eviscerating our rights, it could certainly make sense that things get harder and not easier.
Yeah, I just don't see how this could result in more freedoms, even if we don't lose any more. And if nothing else, the population now is just as on board with losing those freedoms and being okay with it as they were after 9/11. If you look at the news, everybody's saying like, notice how the word war and that we are at war is present in virtually every major news broadcast that is being like released out there. We're at war. Once again, we're at war. But this time is this with this invisible enemy. It's not Muslim, it's not Christian, it doesn't live in caves in Afghanistan, and it's even worse. It's even harder to catch and kill. But it's gonna require that all of us, we act together and we don't ask too many questions, because you gotta trust the powers that be. They're really have your best interest at heart. So
Georgi,
it's kind of sad, but we'll see how it plays out.
I'm so sorry to do this to you. Is it at all possible for you to turn your mic 180 degrees? That's what we're getting in the chat here. But I know it's plugged in, so is that impossible to do? Like just literally turning it around. Yeah.
Like this?
Yeah. And now
I just don't see what this changes. I mean, I hear the exact same voice as before.
Whereas people were mentioning that's how it looked when you sounded really, really good. Okay, guys, there's like a technical difference for how we're setting this up versus maybe the last time that Georgie's audio sounded really good. So that might be
also, last time we were on Skype.
Yeah, I think it might be Skype versus Zoom, to be honest with you. So I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Okay, the whole point.
The Skype sound has a lot more bass than Zoom. Actually, because when I'm doing the interviews with Janelle, she also uses Zoom, and Kitty. Right now the sound is a lot flatter, like with less bass, and it sounds the same way when I'm doing the interviews with them. So I don't think it's the microphone. I think it's something about the software connection.
We'll just go with it. Yeah, it might be compressing your voice. Okay, so the whole point of this was to get through the super chat questions. I seriously tried to warn people that we were not going to answer the super chats, and I got a lot of flack for that. But guys, it would now they're saying sounds worse than before. Good Lord. I don't know what to do, guys. Sorry. But anyways, the thing, let me just explain myself real quickly. I didn't want to get into the super chat questions when I had Ray on, because one, I had zero idea of what to expect when he was on there. And my whole purpose for having Ray on is to really explore, hopefully, like semi-new territory. And so if it goes into nutrition or it goes into the carrot salad, that's fine. But I really wanted it to go new places. And I was really pleased with how that episode turned out. And so, yeah, that if we were answering every single super chat on that, it would have taken hours, and then it would have just been it would have been kind of the same old, and I wanted to take it to a new place if that was possible.
I like that a lot. I mean, I thought we asked questions and discussed topics that
I really just want
to
facilitate you talking to Ray. And so
Thank you.
So I thought that would bring it to a new place. And so and he'll be back on the show is it next month, like the 24th or something? I'll get the schedule out.
If he agrees, right? I mean, you never know.
Yeah, no, I think he did confirm with us, so I think we're all good. And he also said, you guys didn't hear it, but he said it was fun talking to you guys, and he never says that.
Oh wow, I'm honored. I'm floored.
Okay. Well, while we're talking about Corona, is there anything? Maybe we could do an article on your website, hey.me, and then we could go do a few super chats and then go back to an article.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to keep it within the Corona topic, there are two of them.
You know what?
I guess the latest one is
Let's
the COVID.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Okay,
Yeah,
COVID-19, SARS.
yeah, maybe simply due to the elevated serum PUFA and its peroxidation. And these two articles were sent to a reader of mine. He reads the blog and he reads the forum as well. So I've been having like back and forth with this guy for like at least 4 years. Initially he was highly doubtful of the whole PUFA connection, right? But after a while he started sending me these things that sort of like corroborate many of the discussions we're having here, and it's often like really like I mean I guess Ray has kind of touched upon this. He said that the people who are developing these respiratory failures, they're already having like high inflammation in the lungs, and of course the inflammation is at least partially driven by PUFA. But even Ray, I don't think he ever said directly that hey, it's PUFA that's actually causing this disease, and that's really what it is. It's just a symptom of high levels of peroxidation in the lungs, and also the inflammatory mediators that are being derived from PUFA. And that's exactly what these two studies show. And they also show that giving people drugs, and they gave, in one of the studies, they gave people something called lysophilline. And it's basically, it's like a more lipophilic version of caffeine. So you can try that at home. I guess you can try taking caffeine instead of the lysophilline. And it's a drug that lowers the levels of polyunsaturated levels in the blood. And that was enough to cure the majority of the people who were admitted in the hospital, either admitted with the hospital with ARDS, they call it the acute respiratory distress syndrome, which is just another name for SARS, right? And or they had patients that were in the hospital and they developed sepsis and ARDS as a result of the procedure that they had in the hospital, and they stayed in the hospital for a few days. Long story short, taking the two studies together demonstrate that it's basically the peroxidation of PUFA, and they even mention one specific metabolite that's particularly bad. It's called 4-hydroxy-2-nonenal. So it's an aldehyde, and it's similar to the notorious malondialdehyde we've discussed so many times on your podcasts, which is like the biomarker of elevated PUFA levels either in the diet or in the blood because of excessive lipolysis. So these two studies combined demonstrated that ARDS/SARS is nothing more than inflammation triggered by elevated PUFA in the blood, and consequently the metabolism into the prostaglandins, leukotrienes, and thromboxanes through the arachidonic acid pathway, combined with the peroxidation and these aldehydes and other toxic byproducts of the peroxidation process. So giving people things that either lower the levels, kind of like removes PUFA from the bloodstream to protect the lungs, or like prevents its peroxidation. And I mentioned vitamin E, aspirin, vitamin C, other antioxidants. Either one of these, or even lowering lipolysis with niacinamide. That's another way to just get PUFA out of the bloodstream. Is probably going to be highly therapeutic. Yes, the virus is there, but the question now is, okay, so if PUFA is the actual cause of SARS, what's the virus link? Well, as I posted a few articles, one of them was just a month ago, and there two others were about a year ago. The presence of the virus in the bloodstream or cellular debris triggers the HPA, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. It's just a stress signal, right? And whenever you have that, cortisol and adrenaline will rise, and lipolysis will be increased. So it's a stress response that's causing this disease, but not the virus itself. Because and actually they noticed this with in some of the recent studies done with coronavirus, because they noticed that some patients that had almost an undetectable viral load because they were given these antiviral drugs, they were still developing SARS, and they didn't know why. And now these studies kind of give a hint, maybe because these people, like the stress response was already underway, the lipolysis was getting to an excessive level, and too much unsaturated fat in the blood, and these people started going into respiratory failure. But it wasn't the virus that was technically they weren't even sick with the virus. The viral counts were really low to the point where they would be considered either post-viral, right, or like they not an actual active viral infection, and yet they still develop SARS. So it's really So it's the virus is just a mediator. I mean, it's just a particle out there that the body is reacting to, and depending on the energetic reserves, your PUFA stores, right? Those are the things that determine that whether you're going to be developing SARS or not. It's not the virus by itself that's really giving you the disease. It's how you react to it. That's the determinant factor.
Sweet, good stuff. Okay, okay, so let's jump into. So these are some of the super chats. And guys, sincerely appreciate it. The super chats, I sent these straight to Ray. The reason I didn't want to turn the super chats off is I knew that people would want to donate to Ray, and so so I'll just read. We'll go through these. A lot of these don't have questions, but Dave McGee, thanks Ray, appreciate it. Marshall wants. Maybe I'll just not read the names. Thank you, DBO, Oscar, TC. TC, very generous, $300. Send that straight to Ray. Thank you very much for being so generous and kind. And also, I'll screenshot these and forward them. So maybe I'll just read the ones with questions too. Do you have any thoughts on deuterium?
Georgi? I mean, the deuterium water, or why? I mean, is it being used as a treatment?
This biological water produced by mitochondria may explain consciousness. Deuterium, depleted sugars, safer.
Where have you seen that? I mean,
please look into deuterium's effects on dehydrogenase enzymes and such. This is biological water.
Is that a question?
Yeah.
So what is the actual question? What a deuterium would actually help, or will be beneficial for health?
I think this person is in the chat. Intelligent evolution. Can you clarify a little bit, and we'll get to it. But we're gonna skip that for now, and I'll keep my eye on the chat. Anna Tanksa, endometriosis often causes multiple adhesions in the pelvic area. Is it possible to get rid of these often painful adhesions without surgery?
Yes, and I know Ray is going to recommend progesterone, but there have been some promising results with serotonin antagonists, specifically serotonin antagonists that block the 5-HT2B. So basically, the serotonin receptor 2B. That is the receptor responsible for fibrosis and many of the formation of scarring tissue as well. And as I mentioned on several other podcasts, Pfizer is running clinical trials with a drug called thyroid. It's a blocker of serotonin receptor 2B, and they've shown that it can prevent, but also can cure heart failure, which is a type of heart fibrosis, and pulmonary fibrosis as well. And there's some older studies, not with thyroid, but other serotonin antagonists, which demonstrate that they can basically, reduce the fibrotic side effects associated with endometriosis.
Sweet, thank you for that. Another one from Intelligent Evolution. They say, how or why do opiates gradually increase prolactin while lowering gonadal function? And how are dopamine and/or GABA the real neurotransmitters of optimal health and euphoria?
So the opioids, they act through the opioid receptor, and anything that acts as an agonist of the opioid receptor immediately starts releasing histamine and prolactin. Exactly what the mechanism behind this whole cascade is, I'm not completely sure. But anytime you take in a potent agonist of the mu opioid receptors, that would be the end result. And this has been known for a very long time. So anytime you raise prolactin has a suppressive effect on the pituitary, not the pituitary, but on the gonadal function, similar to the way estrogen does. Histamine does as well. I mean, it's an inflammatory mediator. So GABA and dopamine, first of all, dopamine is going to lower prolactin and release this inhibitory effect on the gonads, and GABA tends to increase the degradation of serotonin, and also by lowering serotonin, or at least increasing its turnover, that also tends to have a reduction effect on prolactin as well. So it's really the prolactin effect, the prolactogenic effect of the opioids that is behind their anti-gonadal effects or hypogonadal effects, so to speak. But the histamine doesn't help either. And actually, there are histamine receptors that are expressed in the testicles of males, and it's known that administering histamine or histamine H1 agonist, the agonist of the H1 receptor, are actually, they're capable of causing hypogonadism. And conversely, by blocking these receptors, if there is a histamine overload, you can actually restore gonadal function to normal. In general, anything that acts as an inflammatory mediator will probably either directly or through a cascade several steps down the way, it's going to inhibit gonadal function simply because gonadal function is considered by the body to be dispensable. And it's one of the first things to basically decline because it's energetically very expensive, similar to higher cognitive function. So your higher cognitive function, your creativity, and your gonadal function are the first ones to be thrown to the side if there is an issue with health, if you have a trauma, or if there's a chronic inflammation, or if you're taking opioids and basically you're throwing yourself into a hyperprolactinemic slash histaminergic state.
We can we'll go through a few of these and go into something else, and then we'll come back to them so we don't wear everybody out. Again, this episode really is to catch up on these questions. So we probably get this a lot, but the coronavirus, how to protect older parents. Do you have any, like, I know Ray said vitamin D. Do you have any kind of bare
If
bone
they're
things?
actually if they're amenable to it, I think something like a combination of progesterone and DHEA in a ratio of at least 3 to 1 would actually be great because it's as one recent actually several recent studies demonstrated, inhibiting aromatase, or in other words, either lowering the synthesis of estrogen or blocking its effects somehow, completely restores the size of the thymus gland. And thymus gland happens to completely atrophy after about the age of 50 in most people. And that's actually one of the main reasons why all of these diseases start to spring up and affect elderly people a lot more than they do others. So anything that you can do to lower estrogen or block its effects is probably going to be highly beneficial. So things like vitamin E, aspirin, progesterone, DHEA. I think vitamin E may be probably one of the first and most acceptable steps, not only because vitamin E is over the counter, but because vitamin E has specifically been tested for improving immune function in the elderly, and it was shown that a daily dosage of 400 international units IU's dramatically decreased the incidence of pneumonia in nursing homes, and that pneumonia in nursing homes happens to be the number one cause of death among elderly people. They actually die of pneumonia either because they're bedridden or they basically caught a cold or a bacterial infection, and because their immune system is suppressed, it grows into a pneumonia and they die from it. So vitamin E was shown to reduce the rate of pneumonia by 72% just by taking 400 international units. So I think its effects on suppressing estrogen, or at least estrogen's effects, that probably has to do a lot with its benefits, with the benefits that was seen in improving the immune function of the elderly. So vitamin E or aspirin, that will be the first things they'll try. And if they are amenable to steroid therapy, so to speak, progesterone and DHEA will be the other things they'll try. If also other things that can be done that are over the counter, but there happen to be drugs, the antihistamine Benadryl probably could help. It's been shown that, first of all, that antihistamine also has anti-serotonin effects, and it has been shown in a number of different studies to be able to block the replication and the infection, even with some lethal viruses like Ebola, rabies, and even HIV. Now, whether you agree that HIV is a lethal virus, that's a separate story, but Benadryl was successfully used in at least 3 separate studies. And structurally, Benadryl is very similar to the anti-serotonin drug Finasteride, which Ray mentioned on a few recent interviews. And Finasteride is known to be able to stop the development of COVID-19 and potentially cure it. So it can both prevent and cure it. Unfortunately, it's not available directly, but diphenhydramine, which is the chemical name of Benadryl, is structurally very closely, is a very close structural analog and potentially has similar effects.
And do you have any thoughts on the how it's being tested? Like I did, somebody, who was that scientist that Ray mentioned, the German guy, and he was basically saying that how they're testing things is like completely unreliable.
You mean like for the virus?
Yeah.
I don't think that the test is very accurate. I mean, the current test that they have that's most widely available, I think, has like a unacceptable high level of false positive rates. It's like
Well,
40 to 60%.
he said something like you have to treat those tests like they're products from the pharma industry, but they never tested them. They just ran with the test. But I only say that because it's like people are kind of like putting a cart. I mean, they can do whatever they want, but it's like I if there's no way to even test for this virus, like it's really the like, worrying how not to get it seems
Yeah, I
strange.
mean the test, and I don't think the powers that be are
Yeah,
hiding it.
Wolfgang Wogard, I think is the name.
Yeah.
Thank you, John.
The test that I saw, the latest one on the news, somebody sent me an article showing that there are 40 to 60% false positive rates. So, and you can also see that in some of the news coming out of China. Now they're saying that people who had the virus and then were tested as they were leaving the hospital and they tested negative, and then within 24 hours were given another test, and then they tested positive, and they brought them back to the hospital. They gave them the same test, and now they're testing negative. So now they're like, what's going on? Either this virus is so rapidly cycling that it doesn't make sense. We never seen anything like that before, or our tests are complete bunk. So most people are leaning towards the latter version because it's just all these tests were pushed through approval so quickly that there wasn't really any double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled trial. And now a lot of pharma companies are getting rich, but their tests themselves are probably not complete junk, but definitely not something that I would entrust my life and health to.
Yeah, or putting like an RFID chip on your body that you do not have. Um, okay, I just put up on the screen the Ray Pete archive with this, which is John Burkhausen, and does some of my favorite interviews with Ray, and so he just did two excellent ones, and Patrick Timpone did another good one with him as well. Did you have a chance to listen to these, Georgie?
No, I mean, are these the recent ones about the coronavirus?
Yeah, he did a part one and part two, and I just thought they were really great. John is like, what?
No, I haven't listened to them, but I mean, we kind of touched upon this. Um, I don't know if you interviewed Ray. I mean, I saw like a transcription of it, and he said he has a lot of sympathy for the current administration, the federal government, which he normally doesn't, because he's saying that they're getting pushed to implement a lot of these crazy responses that he thinks are completely unwarranted, and it's just the impact of them, even health wise. Forget about the economic impact, but health wise, it's more likely to do harm than good. Clustering all these people in the hospitals, cross infecting each other, not really knowing the true infection rate, and then broadcasting all these news about this ridiculously high mortality rate. And I just sent you an article today that Dr. Fauci, who is like the face of the government's response to the coronavirus, is saying, yeah, it kind of starts to look like this is, just like another severe influenza epidemic with a confirmed fatality rate of about 0.1%. That is the fatality rate of the regular influenza. And so basically, I don't even know why he put the qualifier severe in front of it. We're looking at it, at least so far, through his own words, we're looking at another essentially influenza. Maybe striking somehow, people are more vulnerable to it if they have pre-existing conditions. But guess what? That's probably true of the regular flu virus too. We don't hear about overwhelmed hospitals in the Midwest or in small towns in the United States because it wouldn't be considered news. But I mean, I have friends that are doctors and they spent their residency periods in such hospitals, and they said that, when it's flu season, hospitals often would get overwhelmed. The ER and the pulmonology division will get overwhelmed because they'll have an influx of elderly/sick people, sometimes drug addicts, sometimes homeless people, like that are drunk or otherwise immunocompromised, and they'll get flooded with these people, and the hospital will get overwhelmed. But it won't make the national news. Maybe it'll make the local ones. But even the local ones would, they've seen this before, so it's not news for them.
Good stuff. Okay, back to some of these questions. Christina for a very generous $99.99. Thank you, Christina. Matthew Riley says, how many forum members experience possible low estrogen symptoms of cracking joints, random pains, fatigue, etc. when taking fat solubles? Thoughts? This is actually something I used to hear on bodybuilding forums, but go
I've
ahead.
never heard people experience it from fat solubles. I've heard people experience this on high dose aromatase inhibitors. mostly the zoles, the anastrozole, the letrozoles. I mean, and but I think most of these symptoms are due to the fact that these aromatase inhibitors suppress a lot more than estrogen. Several studies have shown, they also suppress pregnenolone and progesterone synthesis, even though they elevate testosterone levels. So I would like to see studies on combining progesterone and or pregnenolone administration with an aromatase inhibitor and see the same symptoms appear. I have experienced them myself when I used aromatase inhibitors on their own, but when I added a little bit of pregnenolone, these symptoms disappeared. I've never seen reports or received reports myself that people experience them on fat solubles. I mean, if you unless you're taking something extreme, let's say like several grams of vitamin E daily, I don't think you'll be getting to the point of even matching the effects of an aromatase inhibitor of a pharmaceutical aromatase inhibitor. So I don't know what these reports will be based on. Maybe these people are taking something else they're not sharing with us.
Yeah, or maybe it's just interfering with their intestine and causing weird symptoms. Like
That can cause it too. Yeah.
yeah, seriously doubt it's low estrogen. Ruth Conzo says, increasing my progesterone using Progesti changed my life. I am ever so grateful for you, Dr. Pete, Danny, and Georgie. Thank you, Ruth. Kirk, for someone who has significant diabetes symptoms, skinny overall, but big gut, black toes, scabs on legs, what could someone do to resolve this? Thank you.
Skinny but big gut. I mean, that actually sounds like a symptom of high cortisol to me. If you look at the symptoms of Cushing syndrome, that would be the definition of it. So I would do some tests and see if cortisol is elevated, and if it is, the regular thyroid recommendation, I think it applies because unless there is a Cushing disease, which is caused by a tumor in the pituitary gland, most of the other cases of elevated cortisol leading to Cushing-like symptoms are usually due to a suppressed thyroid function, and this leads to decreased clearance of cortisol. So it's not that it's overproduction of cortisol, but it's decreased clearance, so it builds up. Fatty liver disease can also cause it because the liver is a major site of deactivating cortisol. So I will do some tests for liver enzymes and liver function and see how what those look like. But if cortisol is elevated, I would consider maybe progesterone or something like Imodium from Cascara, because their Imodium inhibits the synthesis of cortisol. Progesterone blocks the effects of cortisol at the receptor side and also increases the deactivation of cortisol. And aspirin, actually, salicylic acid is being confirmed to be an inhibitor of cortisol synthesis similar to Imodium.
Good stuff. Okay, let me take a little mini break here. Guys, give this episode a like if you enjoyed it. This channel is severely bottlenecked, and I am extremely sure of that. Like, especially the Ray episode, it was so obvious that it was like fire with everything, and then it just stopped at a certain point. And so I just, again, I'm sure it's Google's algorithm, so if you like this stuff, you got to share it, because this channel, so when I was in Mexico in November, I did like an estimation thing of how many subscribers I would have, I think in January, and it was like easily 15,000 given the rate that it was going. And then I have at the moment 11,020. And so I know those estimators aren't accurate, but I'll go, even when I wasn't posting videos on YouTube, I gained like 5,000 subscribers in like 6 months or something. And so again, I don't think YouTube needs to help this channel or whatever, but it's not. It's basically like eviscerating the potential for somebody to find it, I think. So again, give it a like, leave a comment, even if it's a bad comment. I think that helps just the engagement of these episodes, because
there's no bad publicity.
Yeah, because I think we have a core audience who I'm really appreciative of, but I think the potential for growth is very limited. Okay, well, where was I going with that? Okay, so I was gonna go. Let me go. Georgie, follow Georgie on Twitter, twitter.com/hateit. idealabsdc.com. I know money is probably tight. I do coaching as well, but again, I know Cash is tight for a lot of people. Where is my? Oh, I'm so unprepared right now. Here's my flyer for my coaching. If you're interested, I do email and Skype coaching. Again, Georgi's boutique supplement products, idealabsdc.com. Follow Georgi on Twitter. And the only other thing I'm kind of interested in at the moment is if you are on Telegram. I've been trying to post more stuff on there. I think the engagement is pretty high with this, and I was following some creators on here, and I actually really enjoyed it. And so I decided to sign up for it. I know it's not bulletproof in terms of like censorship and stuff, but it still seems to be growing in popularity. And Georgie, any other news?
Let's see. I mean, I keep pushing with my studies. Basically, I'm waiting for the lab in Taiwan that did the DHT study, the first one, to send me a report, and they're doing a second one with a different. It's still prostate cancer, but it's a different type of cell line. So we're going to have hopefully two studies. One with a so-called androgen insensitive prostate cancer, castration resistant is the other name for it, and the other one with androgen sensitive. So far, basically the study completed with the androgen insensitive cancer cell line, and we demonstrated that it is sensitive, and DHT inhibited the growth. And now we want to also show that it didn't promote it; it actually inhibited by about 50%. And we want to now show that DHT also doesn't promote the growth of the androgen sensitive prostate cancer, which is the initial stage that most people have from the very beginning, before getting hit with the castration treatments and whatnot. And then there's good indication that DHT may actually cure a significant percentage of the animals with that cancer. And after these two studies are complete, I'm sure the pharma industry will attack them, but to people who know us and who know Ray's work, I think the evidence will be pretty difficult to dispute. Basically, the so-called villain, the steroid that was claimed to be killing men left and right after they turn 60, mind you, if you actually measure their levels of DHT in the blood, they're much lower than what they would be in somebody who is 20-year-old. But anyways, I think the evidence will be pretty hard to dispute that DHT is anything but a killer. It's actually may save so many people's lives and be even more effective than testosterone, which is now actually in clinical trials for prostate cancer, ironically, because DHT, unlike testosterone, doesn't turn into estrogen. So the only way the only sort of like escape route that the pharma industry has been having so far is that when they saw the successful trials with testosterone in prostate cancer, they came back and said, you know what? It's not testosterone that's working, but it's converting into estrogen, and it's the estrogen that's helping. Well, now we're giving DHT, cannot convert into estrogen, so that line of defense is gone. So unless they somehow, come up with a fake dossier that I'm a child predator, or I don't know what else they're going to come up with, I think the evidence will be pretty clear. I mean, and to me, it's been clear for a long time, but it always helps when an independent lab confirms it. And I'll, after I have the studies published, I mean, I'll show everybody that it's like, even though I sponsor the studies, the lab that did them, they're actually mandated under federal law to report any results to the FDA, or at least to the government agency that's responsible for collecting these results. So even if I did not like the results, even if I decide not to publish them, they report a copy of the real results, of the raw results, to the federal government. And if I decide to publish a fake study, let's say they actually came up, with the results, or no, DHT actually does promote prostate cancer, and I lied and I published the opposite, the studies will immediately be retracted. The federal government knows, and I could go to jail for a falsification of scientific research. So you'll be, yes, I did sponsor it, but aside from that, I had no part other than designing the study and saying, like, these are the groups that I want, these are the dosages of DHT that I want. And after that, the lab took over, and I haven't touched the animals, I haven't administered anything. They're in Taiwan, and I'm here, so it's really like it's an independent. It's kind of I think it's called in the industry, it's called the CRO, Clinical Research Organization. They're a third-party independent company that runs the trial, so that you can really influence the results, and that's what we've done here. So looking forward to that, and I have a bunch of other studies in the works, and one of them will be with our product Pyroset, which is a fatty acid oxidation inhibitor. I have some high hopes for that too. Let me just turn on the
All
light.
right, take your time. Guys, thank you so much. Watching the chat and talking to Georgie at the same time looks good. Appreciate it. Thanks again.
So yeah, I mean the scientific work is ongoing. It's, if anything, it's actually intensifying, but unfortunately, the labs that I'm using, one in Bulgaria and the other one in Taiwan, are both right now under lockdown. So that's what's affecting the publication of the results. I think I sent you one link for about cortisone, the first publication of the study that we did on murine leukemia, and there will be a second study with the actual autopsy results and the tumor sizes and the metastasis. I think that's what most people will be interested in seeing. That one is about to come out as well, as soon as the lab reopens, because right now Bulgaria is actually in a bigger shutdown than China.
Really?
You cannot go out on the street. It's actually it is equivalent to martial law. You cannot go out on the street, and if you do, you're only allowed to go to the pharmacy, to the doctor, or to the store once every 3 days. And if they catch you doing this otherwise, it's basically risking 5 years of imprisonment in a maximum security prison, or like $100,000 fine. So,
Yeah.
needless to say, the country is in lockdown.
Yeah, Georgie and I were talking a little bit about the possibility of martial law, and so people in the chat, is that, are you seeing tanks being moved around? Because that is a frightening thing that I've seen on Twitter.
Yeah.
But it'd be interesting to see kind of what you guys are noticing. Okay, so let's keep going through these super chats, and we'll periodically take breaks. Where did we stop? Okay, Zhao, let me get back to you. Zhao Berg says, I've been dealing with PFF for years now. What causes the condition, and what are some approaches for potentially solving it? Thank you.
What's PFF?
Post-finasteride syndrome.
Oh, oh, that's opening a whole can of worms. I mean, what's causing it? Finasteride is causing it, but there are multiple aspects to it. There's a metabolic aspect. There's an actual physical/structural damage to some of the nerves. There's also a hormonal imbalance that finasteride causes. Ray seems to think that the gastrointestinal tract is also involved. And I happen to agree, because I think finasteride, basically the androgens are very intimately involved in the motility of the gastrointestinal tract.
Oh, really?
And a few recent animal trials, animal studies, which I send you, show that animal models with Alzheimer's, the mice and the rats have really degenerate gastrointestinal tracts, and that they gave these mice and rats dihydrotestosterone, the strong androgen, and it fixed the GI symptoms and recovered partially the cognitive ability of the mice and the rats. So there's something going on in the gastrointestinal tract as well when androgens are low, and that's what finasteride does. I mean, basically, yes, it elevates your testosterone at the expense of dihydrotestosterone, but it looks like it's DHT that's really keeping your gastrointestinal tract healthy. And that's corroborated by another study which demonstrated that in very old animals, if you give them an aromatase inhibitor, their gastrointestinal motility recovers back to youthful levels. And many people older people can relate to this, because their motility slows down. They're having like bowel movements once every few days instead of every day, and that seems to be due to low androgen / high estrogen, at least in the males, and in the females it's probably the high estrogen, low progesterone environment. So I mean, like I said, it's a multi-pronged, multifactorial bag of reasons. But ultimately, I think addressing the metabolic aspect by supplementing thyroid, because finasteride has been shown to affect the thyroid directly, would be a very important aspect. And also, in cases where this doesn't help enough, I think supplementation with progesterone and an androgen may be necessary, because the nerve damage that was noticed as a result of finasteride was of a demyelinating type, and progesterone and pregnenolone are the two steroids mainly responsible for myelination. So that supplementation with those may be needed to restore the sheath of the nerve. And then if there are persistent cognitive and sexual side effects, usually supplementation with some kind of an androgen is necessary. I don't know if there's an easy solution, but so far the people that I know that have improved have used at least one of these approaches. And it's just a matter of, I don't know if you're working with a doctor or not, but doctors may be on board about supplementing with the DHT, and that's probably the hardest part because it's DHT is hard to find, and it's unless you get it through a doctor, it's you have to find online sources. But once that's taken care of, then progesterone, progesterone, and thyroid, they're relatively more easier. You can obtain them more easily than the androgens.
Yeah, I get my only thought would be treating it like really, really bad hypothyroidism.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
with structural damage,
yeah.
which probably severe hypothyroidism can cause as well. But this one was demonstrated specifically on the nerve that was responsible for ejaculation and erection. There was a spinal nerve. I'm blanking on its name, but the study is posted on the forum. So if you search for it, you'll find it.
Thank you for that, Georgie. Thank you, Zhao Berg. Another one from Kirk. He says Ray has said that the balding scalp shows high cortisol and PTH rather than T sensitivity. If one made life and diet changes to address this, how long would it take to significantly lower cortisol?
I don't know if I'm one of these patients, and my hair regrows almost completely in the summer, and I actually measure my hormones, and I was actually a Ray textbook subject because when I lost my hair really quickly in my my mid 30s, and basically when I did the test with my doctor, my prolactin was 50, and my cortisol, I think the morning cortisol, the upper limit of normal is like 21, and I was at 42. So basically, that span of 6 months when I lost most of my hair, my prolactin and cortisol were through the roof. And I didn't measure PTH, but my vitamin D, I was actually in the insufficiency zone. So you have deficiency and insufficiency. So I was really the worst, in the worst category that most people have. So after I started supplementing with vitamin D and was taking basically cyproheptadine to lower my cortisol and progesterone, then I noticed that over the summer I regrow about 80% of my hair. I have to take some pictures this summer and I'll show you. And then unfortunately, as basically the weather starts becoming bad as well, because I personally can't tolerate thyroid very well. I'm noticing that between October and let's say March, my hair basically starts to, I'm starting to get, I'm starting to lose hair again. But the good news is doesn't seem to be a permanent thing. So it's definitely metabolic. To what degree you can reverse it and keep it at that level, it's mostly depends on you and your lifestyle, and how much time you can put into it without this turning into a orthorexic exercise. You don't want to focus too much on it because then you're starting to generate some of the cortisol response yourself. So if cortisol, prolactin, and PTH/vitamin D are taken care of on a regular basis, I think most of the hair can be regrown back. There is nothing permanently damaged in the actual follicles. They're not dead. They're just living in a hypoxic environment, which what these stress mediators promote.
And I've often said, you telling me about your life, I feel like if I did all the things you had to do, I'd be dead. Like you have a family to take care of, you have another job. Like I feel like it's difficult just taking care of myself. And so I think I really admire you for that and feel like you deserve a medal. So I have on screen here, I should have really taken more time to craft the tweet, but it says, I'm quoting from the paper. It says men with early onset androgenic alopecia, so-called, have increased DHEAS levels and worse gonadal steroidogenesis. And I got real excited because it was actually just like a random Google Scholar search for seeing if somebody had quoted one of the high DHEA and pattern baldness papers. And then I found this, and it had just come out. And they say, basically, they found elevated DHEA and low serum testosterone, and some
And
people
high
were like,
cortisol.
yeah, you
Also
pointed out the high
yeah.
cortisol, and so I think the prolactin and the high DHEA are linked because like bromocryptine will actually drop the DHEA and PCOS,
Yes.
and I think
Yes.
just stress in males, and so I think again this like elucidates the real cause of the pattern baldness as accumulation of stress over a lifetime, and also the tightening of the vascular supply, I think. And
And
because
just to point out, it's key here that basically, even though DHA was high, this was with early onset.
yeah,
As the years progress, eventually you will see a decline of DHA as well, and then these people will basically be in a state of high cortisol, high prolactin, and there'll be nothing to oppose these stress mediators. So I think at that point is when you're starting to see like a complete loss of hair. So it no longer looks like a androgenic pattern alopecia. It's basically it becomes like a complete alopecia.
yeah,
They have no hair.
yeah. And then I posted a bunch of things under here, but from Ray's prostate cancer article, it says increasingly in both sexes, it appears that DHEA may rise during stress as a result of a deficiency of thyroid, progesterone, and pregnenolone. The one thing I did want to ask you: have you seen any papers where it talks about, say, somebody had high DHEA? Does supplementing exogenous DHEA turn off the adrenals production or the skin's production?
Actually, I haven't seen that. I mean, I've seen that if you take too much DHA, it can suppress your gonadal production
Hmm.
because DHA turns very easily to estrogen. So if you take too much, estrogen does have a negative feedback, and that's how when that people supplement with testosterone, they get themselves shut down. They're like, "Oh my God, it's the testosterone doing it." No, it's actually testosterone converting into estrogen, and estrogen is known to suppress gonadal function by suppressing the pituitary as well. And that's actually why I think we discussed it in one of the podcasts where sometimes postmenopausal women when they get a little of an estrogen therapy, initially they feel relief. That's because the estrogen is suppressing the pituitary. And but if this continues for too long, then you start getting the bad side effects of estrogen. Anyway, so I don't think the DHA can suppress the adrenals. I think what happens if you take a sufficiently high amount of progesterone or pregnenolone, you're probably going to get like a normalization of the adrenal. You're not going to suppress them to the point of they stop producing cortisol. If you take very high dosage of androgens such as testosterone, DHT, or any of the androgenic, not any, but most of the androgenic anabolic steroids, they do suppress the adrenals. So you can actually get into a sort of a dangerous quasi-Addison condition state, which is like a severe cortisol deficiency because you've suppressed your adrenals too much. The good news is that with DHEA, progesterone, and pregnenolone, you're not going to suppress your adrenals. If you take a sufficient amount of pregnenolone and progesterone, you're just going to normalize the functionality. You're going to turn off the excessive function.
I have on screen here an old article from 2009, and they say stress on, tress is gone. And it's basically how baldness is getting younger in like Indian kids, and they blame it on school, like the stress of, they say stress is one of the main factors responsible for acceleration of male pattern baldness, which is genetic, but would express itself in 40s. Now we get hordes of school and college going youngsters who have begun to go bald, says organizing chairman of the conference, Dr. Suresh Joshipura.
That's horrible. At school, in school, can you imagine this? These are like teenagers going bald.
Well, I remember being on like a hair loss forum and somebody posting, it must have been like monks, like young young men, not men, children monks, and their heads were all like forward on the photo, and you could see that a lot of them had like just receding hairlines and things, but they were really young. They were probably around 10, 13, and it was like clearly something is like not
so
right.
The articles that I've been posting on the young becoming the old, we're not seeing this only in the West. We're seeing it in basically all over the world. Stress is really pervasive.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we can move on because we have lots of super chats. Thank you for that, Kirk. Chris H, thank you so much, Chris. He says, Dr. Pete, many people report benefits of increased energy on NoFap. What are your thoughts on semen retention? Can it increase the metabolic rate? Did I not say that we're not trying to we can't fill in for Ray's information? We're just trying to do this because it wasn't clear. I should have been more clear on us not answering them, but we're just trying to be a secondary consolation prize for the people that shelled out money for us to answer questions. I think I did say that, but just probably good to say it again.
Yeah, I can answer for Dr. Pete. I mean, I can tell you my opinion, right? So I don't think the semen retention itself is anything special. I think it's simply sort of the abstinence for the first, I think 7 to 10 days has been shown to lower prolactin and increase testosterone. But after that, basically, depending on the length of the abstinence, it becomes sort of a stressor itself. Because if you're in a relatively young age and or good health, basically libido will be high and will be getting higher. And if at some point it's not getting sort of satisfied, this itself can actually become a stress factor, and it can become a pretty severe stress factor itself. It has been shown that severe abstinence induced for religious reasons in monks, for example, believe it or not, there are studies on that, can actually lead to severe cognitive slash mental disturbances. So yes, for the first, and again, the studies are, they're looking at the population, so they'll give you an average number. But the studies that I have seen show that first 7 to 10 days seem to have a beneficial effect on the hormonal profile, but they didn't look at anything else. And then other studies saw people who were abstinent for like 6 months to a year, and the results were not good. I mean, these people were basically like, I don't want to say they were losing their mind, but they were aggressive. They were they were losing their thought when they were in a conversation. They couldn't focus. They lost interest in their normal day-to-day activities. All they had on their mind was sex, right? And eventually, even that urge actually disappeared. So that's a strange thing. And basically, after about a year, these monks that are in sort of self-isolation lost their sexual desire. And then after that, basically, they started getting severe cognitive disturbances. They started forgetting people that they know. They're starting to isolate themselves. Sort of like self-imposed social isolation. And that's usually a sign of beginning schizoid type personality disorders, if you want to use the modern terminology. So yeah, I wouldn't do it for too long. I mean, basically, depending on your health and age, a few weeks to a month may help, but I don't think it's something that should be practiced because it will always have health effects. After a while, this deprivation, because that's what it is. You're depriving yourself of a fulfillment of a physiological need. After a while, this deprivation will itself become a source of stress.
Sweet. Yeah, and I think it's like the physiology. Like Ray said something a long time ago that stayed with me, but that high estrogen could cause like an insatiable interest in sex. I think we've said this like a many times on this show, but I really do think that's true. And I think the difference might be the satisfaction at climax. So I think maybe when you orgasm, it doesn't feel as good as maybe when you were like a teenager. And
Especially in
so,
females, I want to emphasize, because high estrogen will reliably cause hypersexuality and lack of satisfaction in females, not in males. In males, if you have high estrogen, you'll tend to have lower androgens, and in that case, if estrogen is high, prolactin will be high, and you usually have no libido. But yeah, as far as the insatiable desire, sort of like there are actually studies, believe it or not, on nymphomaniacs, females, and the majority of them, if I remember correctly, 82% of one study that I saw basically had elevated estrogen.
we okay, we're on page 2. We have like 7 pages to get through. So
I'm not sure you're going to be able to answer all of them because
I know.
I have a stop at like, I don't know, 11 o'clock. Maybe.
Okay, well, okay. Tell me when. Okay, we're at 1:11. We'll get through these as quickly as possible. Uh, okay. Harrison Ben, what is the ideal body fat percentage range for males and females?
I think for females it depends on age and whether they're planning on having children, or they're pregnant, or like they're shortly after having a child. So for males, it also depends on the age, but in your leanness, you're actually doing a disservice to yourself, and it's pretty dangerous. So most of the studies that I've seen show that if your natural body fat is at the point where your BMI is between 30 and 33, that's actually ideal in terms of longevity and resistance to a number of chronic diseases. It does raise your risk. Does raise your risk for some of them, for some other ones, but in general, the mortality rate is actually lower if you're over 35 and your BMI, if you're male, if your BMI is between 30 and 33, and it's actually increasing. Mortality is increasing if you're below or above that. But interestingly, even the morbidly obese were actually had lower mortality rates than people who are considered skinny. who had a BMI, I think, of about between 24 and 25, if you're a male and if you're over 35. And that held especially true if the BMI, the low BMI, was maintained through exercise. In other words, if you're, because that's what exercise does, it artificially raises your metabolic rate, so you burn these calories through stress. And this is done through adrenaline and cortisol. So it shouldn't be a surprise that chronic elevated adrenaline and cortisol are not good for you. And then for females, I think it varies, right? I mean, basically, it's been shown that females who are lean before they become pregnant, basically they have trouble becoming pregnant. So having a little bit of extra fat helps. And then if the BMI is below 27, I believe, then the woman has a much higher chance of miscarriage. So I don't think there is a single best BMI. I think it varies through life. When you're younger, it should be naturally lower. But anything below, I think anything below 25, it's already indicative of a problem. And then as you're growing older, your BMI should rise, right? Unless you're doing exercise. But if you're doing exercise to maintain a low BMI, that's usually not a good sign. It's a sign that you're hypothyroid. You should be seeking other means. You should be raising your resting metabolic rate and not the metabolic rate during exercise. So I would say for a male over 35 and for a female, so for a male over 35, between 30 and 33, it seems to be optimal to keep the mortality rate the lowest of all-cause mortality. Now, if you start breaking it down into diseases, then you start seeing some differences. I mean, higher BMI for males, it increases the risk of colon cancer and cardiovascular disease, but it lowers the risk of a number of other cancers. And I think recent studies show that it lowers the risk of Parkinson's disease and potentially Alzheimer's as well. So if you want to take the ballpark and sort of the average of it all, between 30 and 33 for males over 35, and I think between 28 and 30 for females over the age of 35. Again, this is overgeneralization. If you pick an age group, specific age group, and a specific lifestyle, and time of life for a specific person, then there's probably another different optimal range. But if you want sort of like a generic answer for both sexes beyond a certain age, that's the one that I've seen.
Wait, thank you. Okay, mini break. Follow Georgi on Twitter, twitter.com/hate it, idealabsdc.com, Georgi's boutique supplement company, and I do coaching. Follow me on Telegram. And next week, I think is supposed to be me, but it's kind of up in the air. We'll see what happens. And then after that is Emma, and then after that is Ray and Georgi. So that should be a good schedule. Okay.
Excellent.
Francis Bacon Cheeseburger says 2 drops of cortisone on my skin makes me grumpy, as if raising my cortisol adrenaline levels. Am I dosing incorrectly? It doesn't happen with progestin.
I don't know what to tell you, but I know that there's a number of publications demonstrating that that progesterone raises allopregnanolone, especially when used in lower doses. And allopregnanolone has so-called paradoxical effects. Actually, it's on the Wikipedia page. If you go to type allopregnanolone, go to the Wikipedia page and scroll. I think there's like a section for mood effects, I believe. There's a paragraph there that basically talks about paradoxical effects in a U-curve, like a U-curve shape dose response effect. So in lower doses and higher doses, progesterone worsens mood because of its conversion into allopregnanolone. But in moderate dosages, around 50 to 75 milligrams daily, it doesn't have that effect. So you may be getting the allopregnanolone paradoxical effects, and also the progestin, depending on which version you use. So I don't think they can be compared directly because the progestin is a tocopherol-based solution product, and most people take it orally, at least to my understanding. While the cortinones that we have, one of them is the SFA/ethanol version, and that's the one most people use topically, and it has a different absorption. I don't know how to say it. A different absorption profile compared to progestin, and really different effects because the DHEA actually competes with progesterone for access to the enzyme 5-alpha reductase. So the effects that you're going to get from cortisone are different, both metabolically and hormonally, than what you'll get from pure progestin. Also, the progestin, I've been told by people that they feel the effects of progestin a lot later than they do feel the effects of cortisone. And I think the fact that progestin uses vitamin E is one reason, because if you ingest it, it takes several hours for the progesterone levels in the blood to rise to the point where you started to feel the progesterone effects. And vitamin E in progestin also slows down the absorption, the uptake of the progesterone into the cell. And these effects can last up to 48 hours because that's the half-life of vitamin E in the body. With cortisone, especially if you're doing the SFA ethanol version, the effects tend to be much more rapid, and the tends to be like a much quicker, higher influx into progesterone and DHEA into the bloodstream, and of course, much quicker fall afterwards. So my guess would be, to answer your question, is that you're getting the allopregnanolone response. I will try a different dosage, and also different times of the day. The reports that I've been getting some other reports about headaches, but people said that they're only getting it when they're using cortisone before bed, but when they use it in the morning or in the middle of the day, they didn't get the headache.
Sweet. Oh man, I really bit off more than I could chew here. Um, uh, yeah. Is it normal to have low body temperature at home on a day off? When I'm busy at work, it goes up to 37 or close. Should I still be 37 on a day off?
What is a classic sign of low metabolism, basically, and the fact that while you're at work and while you're busy, it doesn't rise above 37. I mean, if this was due to a good thyroid function, you would see it rise to 38, 38 to even 38 and a half. I'm presuming the person is speaking about Celsius, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then if if when you're calm, if your temperature falls down, this is a classic indication, a classic sign that you're running on stress hormones, because it's the adrenaline and cortisol that can raise the temperature when you're under stress, but they're not thermogenic enough to raise the temperature, your core temperature. They're only raising the peripheral one. So that's why when you measure the temperature, you usually don't go above 37 when you're under stress. I would try to eat a little bit of salt while you're calm, or eat some kind of a salty snack, and see if that remediates the situation. If it doesn't, you may want to test thyroid function and see where you stand on that, because you may be in need of actual thyroid supplementation.
Georgie, if you could live anywhere, where would it be? What were the main factors for the consideration?
Somewhere at higher elevation than where I'm currently. I mean, I'm very close. I mean, I'm almost at the sea level right now. I would want to be somewhere at least, let's say 500. I would say about 2,000 feet would be my preferred altitude. I don't. I mean, I do like sunshine. I don't want to be living too far north or too far south, where you're basically getting these like prolonged, even months long periods of like not sufficient sunshine. I like some of the Latin American countries close to the equator. I like the Andes Mountains. Clearly, obviously, it's a very nice area there. I do like Europe. I mean, I wouldn't mind living in the Alps. And if I had enough money and didn't have to take care of children and do my household chores, I would probably visit my Italian friend in the Tiantian Mountains. I mean, he seems to be doing pretty well. He sends me pictures every once in a while. His hair is still there. He's hasn't lost his hair ever since he regained it. And the commune there seems to be doing fine. It's comprised mostly of expatriates. They're not. I mean, they're about 40% American, but there's a decent portion of people from Europe and Russia. There's some Latin Americans as well, and they're kind of like, the only reason I haven't done this already, I mean, at least visit them, is that they're a bit of like the doomer culture, like the dooms preppers. They've sort of given up on the world, and they're sitting there and they're kind of waiting for the end of the world. So unless you have that same mentality, you're probably not going to fit in very well. And after about a week, you're going to start getting on their nerves, and they're going to start getting on yours, and they'll have to leave. So to answer the question, a higher altitude, at least 2,000 feet, and I would say no more than 35 to 40 degrees away from the equator. And then in terms of countries, I would say any country that's peaceful and doesn't have high prospects for war. I mean, I don't need to tell anybody that war is not good. And what was that saying? There's never been such a thing as is a good war and a bad peace. I think there was like a U.S. president who said this once, and I couldn't agree more.
Sweet. Okay. Thanks for that. I don't, I don't know what to do with all these questions. Harrison Ben, thoughts on? Oh no, I didn't. We talked about progesterone a lot. Okay, let's go to the next page here, guys. Sorry, I have to. I don't know what to do. I have to skip some of these. These are topics we've talked about frequently. There was another. Maybe you can do hit two birds with one stone. Is there anything I can do to help with a tendinitis? It gets worse at night.
Yep, I just posted something on my blog. You can check it out. A serotonin antagonist can actually cure it completely. So tinnitus is actually very. It's at this point it's well known to be related to gastrointestinal irritation. And with people ask Pete in the past, he keeps talking about endotoxin and nitric oxide, but the remedies that people try there tend to work only temporarily. Specifically, take charcoal. Yeah, in many cases, actually will stop the tinnitus completely, but after a few hours or upon your next meal, it will reoccur. And in this study that I posted, it's about one serotonin antagonist. I think the study with humans actually cured it for good. So it seems to be driven the pathological agent in this case seems to be serotonin. But serotonin is, of course, produced 90% is produced in the gut. So it's probably caused by something else, and that something else is usually the endotoxin. So in terms of managing it on an ongoing basis, keeping endotoxin levels as low as possible, eating easily digestible food, taking the antibiotics if you have to, the traditional remedies for keeping the GI tract coming along. And for specifically severe cases, you may want to try some Benadryl. There's a drug called Dramamine that they sell in stores. This seems to work, but it seems to be only temporary, and I think it seems to also have serotonergic effects. And people complain that when they use it that they use it long term, it actually makes their situation worse. It actually initially the tinnitus abates, it never disappears. It abates or other more specific serotonin antagonists that maybe maybe even a better approach.
And you have to go at the end of this hour.
Yeah, at 11 o'clock I have to leave.
Okay, guys, we're definitely not getting through all these super chats. We have like many questions, and then we're getting more as the time goes on.
I mean, think about it. Like if
with those shows, where it's impossible to. I just received many emails of people that were really upset, and so I wanted to leave it open because I'm going to send Ray like a fat check of all these super chats, and once I get the money in my Google AdSense. But it's even impossible to answer, even make a dent in them. And I don't know. We've been on here for close to 2 hours, so yeah. I guess and I guess we should maybe before you leave, maybe try to answer some of the ones we just got.
Oh, so we got more.
Yeah, so these are new ones. Man, we're in like up to super chats and our eyeballs here. Okay.
So you know what? I mean, maybe we should have like different kinds of shows. Like we have like a show because it's also stretching for too long if we're doing both discussions and super chats. Maybe there should be like a only like a chat answering session, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also like maybe a session only for discussions.
Well, I feel like this has inhibited our ability to talk, which is like kind of not that fun. But again, it's my fault. I said this was going to be just answering questions, so have to work that out in some way. Okay, Sam MP for $4.99. We talked about tinnitus already. Thank you so much, Sam. Sam says Estroban okay with high serum calcium, 1.25 calcit.
I don't see why it would be a problem. I mean, vitamin E, usually the high serum calcium, if it's not caused by vitamin D deficiency, which makes PTH rise, and prolactin often also rises. I'm sorry. So if it's not caused by the vitamin D deficiency, which makes PTH rise, the elevated calcium, the second most common cause is actually slightly elevated estrogen/prolactin. So if anything, the vitamins that are in estroban should be helping lower prolactin and estrogen, and the vitamin D should be helping to lower PTH. But just to make sure, you may want to do some tests for vitamin D, parathyroid hormone, and phosphorus, serum phosphorus, and prolactin, and see where you stand on that. Because if you know that it's the prolactin that's causing it, if all other things are coming back normal, then you know that estrogen is actually supposed to help. So you shouldn't even be concerned about about it potentially hurting.
Yes or no question. Have you experimented with pure DHT?
Yes, I have. But it was a very so it was early in my Peterian years. It was back in 2014, and I got a very small sample, and I ran out of very quickly. And since then, I haven't been able to obtain more. So I thought the effects were amazing. I mean, basically, I didn't notice that many bodily effects, but the mental effects were astounding. I mean, it immediately removed my brain fog, and I was able to like read for hours without even feeling the need to get up and eat or drink or do anything else. It calmed me down in a way that I haven't experienced. I haven't used anything else since then that will do that. I mean, cyproheptadine can calm you down if you take sufficient amount of it, but it also makes you feel like a zombie. So you can, other than sleeping, you can't really do much afterwards. While DHT gives you this clarity and calmness of mind, no racing thoughts whatsoever, no worries, no anxiety, and you can do whatever you want for hours. I thought it was more of a mental drug than anything else. So I was surprised that people think of it as an androgenic anabolic steroid. My experience with it was that it was much more of a mental drug, almost like amphetamines or anything like that. But amphetamines tend to make people jittery after a while. So it was, anyways, purely mental slash cognitive effect for me. Even though I like the physiological effects, like it did harden up my muscles, but it was not like these steroids that people would use to get them pumped up. And if you talk to bodybuilders, they'll tell you DHT is not the steroid to use for that. You get it mostly to cut your physique, to lower body fat, and for they call it like the alpha male personality. You become assertive, you become confident, you know what you want, and you go after it. I don't know about that latter part. I mean, I do think that it makes you more perceptive and more able to do cognitive work. I don't think it makes you the alpha male that the bodybuilders are claiming they will make you. Like the aggressiveness and the pursuit of females and money and resources and whatnot. I think there are several studies that have shown this is like actually a spillover effect from high testosterone going into estrogen through aromatase. When you give people when you give high testosterone people aromatase inhibitors, they actually stop taking as many risks. So the whole risk-taking macho lifestyle and attitude that seems to be more of an effective estrogen than androgens.
Sweet. I've never taken it, so I don't have any experiences with it. Um, Michael asked this question multiple times. He says, "Dear Danny and Georgie, what do you think of milk sugar and heat, as in dulce de leche and cajeta? Are they problematic?" Um, I
Why would they be problematic?
Yeah, I know. I think they're okay. I think milk sugar and like heating the sugar, the Maillard products.
Oh, the Maillard reaction. Yeah. I don't think it's a problem. It's like it becomes a caramel, right? So I have not seen any studies that demonstrate, because I know there are studies that feed like a caramelized sugar to animals, and I've read them. I did not see a study that found bad effects from caramelized sugar.
I think Ray had a funny response to somebody that asked a similar. I hope I'm not misquoting him, but he said something like, "Yeah, they do have bad products, and I'm not going to stop eating them." So it's kind of like classic Ray. Okay, we have about 10 minutes left for Georgie here. Somebody asked why I block people. I feel like I'm extremely lenient on people, and it's usually like a level of rudeness that is really egregious over a long period of time that finally gets me to block a person. But I really
There is
barely.
something to be said for blocking people more easily. I think it's because if you tolerate the weirdness, so not the weirdness, but like the obnoxious for too long, then it comes as a shocker when you block people, because you're like, well, you tolerated it for so long. What
I
happened now? I'm being
I,
the same asshole as before.
So if somebody, I think the kicker is the few times I've done it is people told me to stop doing something. Like I think I had posted something
Oh
on
yeah.
ketogenic diets, and the person was like, "Stop posting this ketogenic diet stuff," and they just had such a long history of just being really unbearable that I was like, "Okay, I think
Yeah,
things are
that's it for now.
done
Yeah.
here." Okay, Thank you for that, Lisa Mana. Um, Guys, I'm so sorry. We're like really screwing up here on super chats. I will have to work this out. Jaeger ODA says thoughts on high dose aspirin caffeine for similar mitochondrial uncoupling effects. I feel like we've answered this question a dozen times on DN, maybe even effects of DNP for weight loss. You don't have to spend a ton of time on this.
Well, there's a study that's one of the first studies you quoted on your blog from my posting on the forum. It showed that caffeine at a concentration of 250 micromoles per liter had equivalent effects to dinitrophenol. In order to get to that concentration in the cell, you need about 1,200 to 1,500 milligrams of caffeine. That's 1.2 to 1.5 grams. I don't know if that it's a safe thing to. I mean, the really dangerous effects of caffeine start to happen after about 3 grams per person. But it's caffeine can be dangerous. It really depends on the person, their weight, their age, their liver status, and how quickly they metabolize it. So I don't know if it's safe to ingest that much caffeine in one sitting. I think something like maybe 400 milligrams a few times a day, combined maybe I don't know, like 2 tablets of aspirin per pop, that would probably get you close to what dinitrophenol does, without running into the same side effects of overheating and potentially even killing you from hyperthermia and dehydration. So I think it's a viable approach. I think thyroid can do the same. I think progesterone can actually do the same much more safely, because with progesterone, if you start taking too much, it will knock you out. So you will be drunk for a while and you won't be able to overdose through on it. Um, while with aspirin and caffeine, basically like you won't know you've overdosed until it's too late. While with progesterone, it's just going to knock you out. So yeah, it is a viable approach. I just wouldn't necessarily take that dose in one sitting that will give you the equivalence to dinitrophenol. I think it's better to. It will get less of an effect, but it will be safer if you spread it throughout the day.
Thanks for that. Cardo Chav says, can you talk about methylene blue could raise serotonin? What doses could trigger that pathway?
So methylene blue is it's confirmed to be a monoamine oxidase type A inhibitor, and that enzyme is the one that degrades most of the serotonin and dopamine in the body. There's also monoamine oxidase type B, and that enzyme mostly has preference for degrading dopamine. So back in the day when they were coming up with these antidepressant drugs, right? So they developed both monoamine type A inhibitors and type B inhibitors. They noticed that both of them had antidepressant effects, but the monoamine type A were working better and quicker, but they also had the potential risk of causing serotonin syndrome. That's probably how, that's actually the main mechanism, that's the main mechanism through which methylene blue may raise serotonin. Now, there are published case studies of methylene blue triggering serotonin syndrome, but to my knowledge, it has always been in conjunction with some other drug, like a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, which already increases extracellular serotonin. It has never been methylene blue by itself. And I do know of two published cases where methylene blue by itself triggered serotonin syndrome, but both cases was in the hospital. The person was in shock. They were undergoing surgery, and basically they had 3 to 400 milligrams of methylene blue pumped into their body intravenously over a period of less than a minute. So yes, in those doses, under those circumstances, it can probably be dangerous. But keep in mind that human studies have used methylene blue orally in dosages of about 15 milligrams daily with profound beneficial effects on mental health. I think it cured completely treatment-resistant depression that the study said that it was not amenable to anything else, and also stopped psychosis, basically, which is known to be caused by serotonin. So the two human studies that used 50 milligrams daily orally noted absolutely no side effects. Now, it can be a problem if the person is taking something else that is already inhibiting monoamine type A, monoamine oxidase type A, and or raising serotonin through other means. So if you're taking any kind of a supplement and it has tryptophan in it, right? then it could be potentially dangerous to use methylene blue with it. But if you're eating your normal diet and you're not taking any drugs that are elevating serotonin, inhibiting its uptake or inhibiting its degradation, in other words, other monoamine oxidase inhibitors, in the doses that were shown that methylene blue works remarkably well for humans for mental disease. And recently, the Alzheimer's study showed that basically the benefits plateaued at about 60 milligrams per day, which is remarkably close to the 50 milligrams used by these older studies for mental health conditions. At those dosages, I'm not aware of anybody ever having problems with methylene blue causing some kind of a serotonergic problem, unless they were also taking something else. And even then, the dose is too low, for it to be causing serious issues. But because of that, I would cap methylene blue usage for most people at 15 milligrams daily, simply because the studies show that even for Alzheimer's, you're not getting any more benefit. And if you're taking those 50 milligrams, it helps to spread them out at about, let's say, 3 doses daily at 5 milligrams each is safer in terms of causing serotonin toxicity than taking the whole 50 milligrams, once a day. And if you're really concerned about that, you can take methylene blue with a little bit of vitamin B2, also known as riboflavin, because the monoamine oxidase type A enzyme is the cofactors for it are riboflavin, vitamin B2, and copper. So if you add even one of the factors, you're going to speed up its effects. So you will likely negate most of the risks that methylene blue would cause, even if you're one of those unfortunate people that will get these side effects at a low dosage. So methylene blue at whatever dose you want, not more than 50 milligrams daily, with let's say 5 milligrams of vitamin B2 should be enough to keep the risk acceptably low.
Guys, give us a like for Georgie's amazing stream of consciousness here. Sincerely appreciate it. And subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. We have Mr. Tim Burzens in the chat here. Thanks for hanging out, Tim. Okay, just a few more, and we'll let Georgie go.
Let's keep going until 11:15. I mean,
okay,
amazing. Text message, so we can have another 15 minutes.
Okay, good. Okay, let me just make sure we don't skip any super chats on that people actually asked for the show. Harry Burgo says, Georgie, can you, so this needs no response. Georgie, can you please post the link title on your site to the older paper you mentioned in the last Danny Rowdy live stream, in which PUFAs decrease cellular resistance to viral infections, as well as increase cell water uptake? So I think that's in reference to the conversation with Ray.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's good. Thank you so much, Harry. Appreciate it. Brandon, this could be a very, very long question or answer, so we'll just stick to the elevator pitch. But Brandon Green says, optimal bioenergetic relationship between polyunsaturated fats and monounsaturated.
In terms of like what ratio should be eaten in the diet, or
I think so.
I mean, actually, so here's the thing. I've looked at all the studies on essential fatty acid deficiency, and none of the animals died. So, and actually, the studies that I've seen, minus the Burr study, which claimed they were getting these, signs of like their skin was cracking, they were starting to bleed through like these cracks in the skin, they were getting these scales, right? And they were getting really skinny, they were shivering, right? Actually, if you look at some of the other studies that are more recent, I mean, they're still from the mid 90s and the mid 20th century, 1950s up to like 1970s. None of them mentioned these signs and symptoms, but they did test and showed that these rats, the hamsters or mice or whatever they use, were remarkably resilient to things like lethal endotoxin shock, lethal exposure to ionizing radiation, like a lethal trauma to the head that would normally, in some laboratories, they actually kill the animals by like a very, very powerful blow to the head or the neck, which dislocates the cervical, breaks the cervical area of the spinal column. None of these studies showed that essential fatty acid deficiency had any negative effects on the animals. If anything, it made them like almost super resilient to whatever stressors the studies were trying to test. So if you ask me, the optimal ratio of PUFA to monounsaturated fats is 0. And actually, even for the monounsaturated fats, I think they're neutral in a healthy person, but in a unhealthy person, or a person that has, like, let's say, is already overweight, has an it has a problem with excess lipolysis, monounsaturated fats, pyruvate dehydrogenase, are palmitic, stearic, myristic, lauric, and a few other of the saturated group, but definitely none of the polyunsaturated fats. In fact, they're known inhibitors of pyruvate dehydrogenase, and none of the monounsaturated groups are known to activate that enzyme. So if you know, so as far as the ratio, I would keep it as close to zero as possible. And if you have to eat monounsaturated fats, I would still make sure that their ratio towards the saturated fats is basically less than one. In other words, you're eating more saturated fat than monounsaturated fat.
Sweet. Thank you so much for that. Who answered that question? Brandon, thank you. Answered Michael's question. Anne, I'm going to refer you to an early part of our conversation. Anne says, can you please give me insight on suggestions for high DHEA, prolactin, cholesterol, and at the same time, low vitamin D and CO2? I have PCOS, anxiety, no energy. So definitely check the thyroid function, because that would bring down the cholesterol, prolactin, and DHEA. And correcting the vitamin D would probably be important. And Georgie, do you have any other?
Also, PCOS is actually now at this point fairly well known to be driven by estrogen. So in the early stage, estrogen is what irritates the adrenals, and while they're still working well, we'll be pumping out a lot of DHEA. But with age, that has been shown to eventually DHEA production declines, and you're stuck with only the estrogen, and that's really when all the really bad problems with PCOS start. So surprisingly, or unsurprisingly, there's some older studies that show that aromatase inhibitors can actually stop PCOS in its tracks. But most doctors, they shy away from that because estrogen is thought is such a beneficial female hormone. Nobody wants to inhibit it. So if the situation becomes really bad, I think high dose of progesterone may help. I have female clients who've said that high doses of aspirin have helped. And I also have clients which have said that cyproheptadine actually managed to fully stop their PCOS, and in many cases reverse some of the fibroid cystic effects that they had. And I was initially surprised by that, but recently I saw studies showing that cyproheptadine has a remarkably strong inhibiting effect on estrogen receptor alpha. So it is a very viable and potent anti-estrogenic drug as well. So if progesterone or aspirin or vitamin E are not working for you for whatever reason, or the situation is really dire, you may want to consider cyproheptadine as well.
Great stuff. Thank you for that, Anne. Answered Cardo Chavs. Rami says, getting good affects warmth from Niagen. Getting either...
Niagen. Oh, is this like the nicotinamide riboside supplement? Let me just check.
I've never been... Is this one of your products?
I think that's what it is.
Okay, Niagen, yeah. Getting either better effects or awful nausea, diarrhea from plain niacinamide.
Yeah. Niagen is the patented nicotinamide riboside.
Okay, and he says, wise to stick to the NR in this case, or sirtuins more important?
So, I mean, if the Niagen is affecting you well, and if it's happens to be like if you look at the label and it doesn't have any problematic ingredients, I don't have a problem with using Niagen / nicotinamide riboside. One issue with it is cost, of course. It's patented. It's the prices that I've seen are usually about 10 times more than something like plain niacinamide. The other thing about Niagen and / nicotinamide riboside is that it activates the certain genes. And those genes are known to be involved in fatty acid oxidation, and they're now known to be involved in many, if not most, cancers. Nicotinamide / niacinamide is the most potent known clinically used sirtuin inhibitor. And just as a comparison, resveratrol was promoted and continues to be promoted as one of the most potent sirtuin and niacinamide on the sirtuins. And I have a few studies posted on the forum and my blog showing that the activation of the sirtuins is intimately involved in the progression, actually even in the initiation, but also the progression of many cancers. So one thing that would concern me about nicotinamide riboside / Niagen is its activation of the sirtuins. But I think if you're staying at the dosages that they recommend on most supplements, which I think is 75 milligrams daily, I don't think the certain overactivation would be a concern. Now, it is interesting that plain niacinamide gives you nausea. In my experience, that only happens in two cases. Either the dosage of niacinamide taken is too high, and or there are certain excipients in the product that are causing this. And personally, I get nausea from niacinamide supplements that contain either silica or hydroxypropyl methylcellulose, I think is what it's called. It's this binder and filler that's used in capsules. So if you can find niacinamide that's like plain powder or capsules that show no other ingredients and try the same dosage as nicotinamide riboside, I think I'll be very interested to compare the results, because whenever I compared apples to apples, in other words, pure ingredients of both types of products at the same dosages or similar dosages, I never got nausea. I did get nausea from a Niagen product sold in CVS, and that one contains silica. So I think it comes down to excipients, most likely, and if not, then it's an issue of dose mismatch. Then maybe the niacinamide dosage was too high.
Sweet. Only like three more, I think. Or
All right.
good. Thank you, Georgie. Guys, give it up for Georgie. You know, he's here just donating his time. Sincerely appreciating that, making this show what it is. So sincerely appreciate you, Georgie. And always have fun with you doing these, maybe except for this one.
I mean, it's still fun, you get to hear what people think, what are their concerns? That's what it's all about, actually.
We might have to cleanse ourselves of the past super chats to kind of move on, because I don't think we can keep doing this. Okay, who did I not get here? Talked about Rami's question. Oh, okay. Matthew Riley says, RP mentioned vitamin B1 for protection against COVID. How much daily B1 is safe? It posted about certain doses of B1 being linked to cancer.
Yeah, I mean, that study that I posted said that lower dosages of vitamin B1, I think they said up to 200 times the RDA. That study thought it would promote cancer, and then very much higher dosages in the several hundred milligrams daily would inhibit it, because of the role of vitamin B1 as a cofactor for pyruvate dehydrogenase. And also vitamin B1, it happens to be a direct inhibitor of carbonic anhydrase. So it promotes the elevation of CO2 and the metabolism of glucose through two different pathways. So I think when people asked Ray Pete about his time in usage, he said that he used to take 50 milligrams to 100 milligrams before certain exams. I think he was studying French at the time. So that was his daily dosage. I've seen great responses with about 300 milligrams, but split into different smaller doses throughout the day, because I think it helps the absorption. It's much more complete. So you're going to get more of that 300 milligrams into your body if you split into two smaller doses of 100 milligrams each than if you take that one capsule once daily. But it's still, even once daily seems to work well, and it's the 300 milligrams daily and above that happens to be the required dosage for achieving the carbonic anhydrase inhibition. Now, in this case, I don't think that plays a role in inhibiting the viral uptake inside of the cell. But if you want to raise the CO2, I'll take 300 milligrams or more. Maybe there's no need to do more than 500 milligrams unless you have a underlying condition that you're trying to treat. And then if the goal is specifically the viral uptake, those 300 milligrams, like I said, I would split them into several doses throughout the day. And vitamin B1 tends to work really well with B2 and B3, and they sort of reinforce each other's function. And also vitamin B2 turns into a molecule that has functionality similar to a quinone. And vitamin B2 is known to be able to increase the generation of reactive oxygen species, similar to what methylene blue will do when exposed to light. And that's one of the reasons why Dr. Pete is telling people, like, you shouldn't be taking more than 20 milligrams of vitamin B2, because if you do and then you get exposed to bright sunlight, you're getting the same effects as photodynamic therapy. that is the therapy that a number of studies demonstrated that methylene blue combined with light can kill the coronavirus. So by taking vitamin B2 combined with that B1, you will not only be increasing the effects of B1, but you may also be getting a direct virucidal effect because of those ROS producing effects of vitamin B2. So and then that will be my and then vitamin B3, it helps because it's a cofactor for energy. And I think there are some studies showing that NAD, the cofactor synthesized from vitamin B3, when it's like basically when the levels are lower, the cells, because they're energetically depleted, they're most susceptible to viral infection. So taking vitamin B3 will increase NAD levels and also help synergize with B1 and B2.
Sweet. Only yes or no, have you ever taken DMT before?
No.
I have not. Thank you for that, Oren.
It's the hallucinogen. I'm assuming it's the methyltryptamine. No,
Yeah,
I haven't taken it.
Ricky Rocks, I don't want to answer your question on air just because I think it could be like grounds for termination. But I don't have a source for that anyways. Okay, I think one of the last ones. Matthew Riley says certain vaccines cause DNA, RNA damage that cause mutating in offspring. Can damage to the gonads be reversed before having children?
I think it can be greatly mitigated to the point of not getting passed on to the offspring by taking progesterone and or pregnenolone. When the studies with pregnenolone were first being done in the beginning of the 20th century, Hans Selye and other researchers that work with pregnenolone thought that pregnenolone has no other effect in the body as the steroid itself, other than being a precursor to all the other steroids. But pregnenolone by itself has no other effect except protecting the gonads from the effects of excess estrogen and all the other toxins that are circulating in the gonads and can cause DNA/RNA damage or direct physical toxic damage to the gonads as well. So I think if there is a concern about damage to the gonads, maybe like a regimen of a few hundred milligrams of pregnenolone, which is what they used back in the day, for a few weeks would help before trying to have a child.
Rami threw us another $5 Canadian dollars. Thanks again, Georgie and Danny. Thank you. And we'll just kind of leave it there, I think. And so again, I apologize to the people that thought they were going to get their question answered on the Ray stream. My fault. I should have been even more vocal about that not happening. I tried, Georgie, thank you so much for hanging out with me. Let's talk about your Twitter again. Follow
Hey,
Georgie.
Let's answer more questions because people are angry. They already know my Twitter.
Okay, I was gonna like wrap things up, so that's why I was
Let's
doing
just do a few more.
Okay,
I can sort of sense the anger is building up.
Okay, well I can sense it too. So, okay, well I think that was all the super chats for this. Okay, there's a lot. We're on page, and I've been skipping some, like 3.
Yeah, I mean, I think because those were mostly people thought they're going to be Ray would answer those, so I think that's why we got so many.
Okay, okay, let me go to page 4. We talked about tinnitus. We talked that. This one's from Veronica Ayala. She says, I have severe under eye darkness that I've struggled with for years. I look very rough under the eyes and puffiness in the morning. Anything I can do to lighten up my under eye area?
The under eye darkness is, in my experience, 2 things: either food allergies, or if it's not due to bad sleep, which can also cause it. In my experience, it's almost universally tied to some sort of a digestive problem. So either a food allergy or like some kind of a food is not sitting well with you and it's causing a digestive disturbance. I've seen people, with elevated liver enzymes develop dark under eye circles. So may not be a bad idea to do some tests for liver enzymes. And if those come back elevated, aside from the typical, avoidance of PUFA, some aspirin may help. Caffeine is great for improving liver function and lowering liver enzymes. Vitamin K is also great. Aspirin I already mentioned. Pregnenolone is also very good in protecting the liver. And anything that would lower their estrogen, because it's really estrogen that's burning the liver, and causing all of these issues aside from the polyunsaturated fat. So things like vitamin B and B1 and B2 are crucial for estrogen excretion, and vitamin A and E are very good at both inhibiting estrogen synthesis and blocking its effects at the receptor level.
Thank you. Veronica Ayala has another question. She says, my son has a cyst near the ear and is starting to get psoriasis. Any feedback on the cause and how to avoid this? Thank you deeply for your help.
So it's the cyst getting psoriasis, or like the psoriasis is happening with
my son has a cyst near the ear and is starting to develop psoriasis.
cysts are almost universally driven by estrogen. So if it's not too big, you can probably help shrink it or maybe even completely eliminate it by rubbing vitamin E mixed with some kind of a safe oil, maybe like medium chain triglycerides or even olive oil would probably help. So a mixture of vitamin E and oil in 1-to-1 ratio, and then just putting enough so that the cyst is covered, and then doing this massaging maybe like twice a day should be enough. I've had clients, not children, but I've had clients who had similar issues, and one managed to basically have a very large cyst right here, like close to their basically where the nose meets the upper. Well, I guess not a lip, but like where at the base of the nose, and it was the size of the nail of the thumb, and they were rubbing on it estroban, and they were noticing that it would shrink, but it wasn't disappearing. So then they basically took estroban and added more vitamin E to it, and they kept rubbing it, and after about a month, it disappeared completely. And coincidentally, in those people that had cysts and tested their estrogen and/or prolactin levels, they usually had a problem with at least one. Typically, prolactin was elevated. I don't know for a child which one would be a better test, but if possible, I'll test both estrogen and prolactin. And if you don't want to do the test, just try the vitamin E remedy or the combination of the four fat solubles. They all have anti-estrogenic and anti-cyst effect.
What was I just going to do? I didn't announce the winners for the Tokovit. So those winners are... Okay. Harry McDonald, Johannes Doderlein, and Kristen Lee. So you guys all have to email me at Danny at DannyRoddy.com, and we'll get the Tokovit sent out to you guys. Georgi, how you feeling? Want to do a few more?
Yeah, let's do a few more. Let's push until 11:30.
Okay, you got it. Okay, so this one, talked about marijuana so many times on the show. I don't want to bring it up again. Nutrition. It's so hard to choose these questions. Huge Ray Pete fan says, I spend way more time than I want fidgeting and scratching my face. Vitamin A doesn't work, and my diet is already 90% PD. Thank you very much for commenting.
My experience with fidgeting is that it's usually driven by intestinal irritation. It's also at night. It's known as restless leg syndrome. And even though in the hospital or like the doctor's office is usually treated by using dopamine agonists, so basically it's a serotonin issue driven by intestinal irritation. So I've known people who treated there successfully with charcoal. I know people who treated there successfully with cyproheptadine. I know people who treated there successfully with Benadryl. I know people who treated there successfully with famotidine, which is also known as Pepcid. It's an antacid drug sold over the counter, but it has a very potent anti-serotonin effect as well. And I also know people who experience relief after taking antibiotics, all of which implicate intestinal irritation once again. So basically, those will be the remedies that I would try, probably in that order. I mean, like if charcoal works good for you, or like increasing other insoluble fibers like carrot and bamboo shoots, that would probably be preferable. If not, then you can try some of the pharmacological remedies.
Helena just says, what do you do with whey from homemade cheese making? I've actually never made cheese at home. Have you?
I have made. I mean, basically, it's a very acidic protein. It really depends. Can it be used as food? Sure, but in my experience, pure whey has a very profound insulinogenic effect, which is actually much stronger than even that of pure glucose.
Mm.
So if you're taking whey, um, it's hard to avoid the proverbial sugar crash, even though in this case it's not sugar. So you're getting insulin that's rising tremendously, and then your blood sugar drops to the point where it's causing a cortisol rebound, and then cortisol rises, that rises your blood sugar, but you're already experiencing a stress response. So it's really, I don't think pure whey is should be consumed. I mean, you can probably mix it with other proteins, in your regular food. I don't know what else, but like maybe eggs. But even though eggs are also insulinogenic, so I don't know what to tell you. I personally would not eat pure whey. I used to use it as a protein supplement. It was always giving me brain fog and like cognitive disturbances, like 30 minutes after drinking these bodybuilding milkshakes, and I always thought it's me, right? Something about me is not right. But then I talked to other people; they were getting the same response. And around 2015, I talked to Ray about it, and he sent me a study which showed that compared the different foods in terms of the insulin response that they would generate, and whey was way up there. Like I know people who basically like do a kind of like a stew. They mix it with some other leftovers from food, or basically put bread in it so it can be soaked, and then they feed it to chickens. So if you're living somewhere out there in a rural area, and you have animals to feed, I know people who emailed me, and I told them this, they can use it on animals, and they're saying it has a really potent anabolic effect on the egg laying of hens. So they're starting to get like twice as many eggs as before when they're feeding the whey protein to the hens, and they usually soak bread with it, and then they give the bread to the chicken. The chicken eats it, and they love it. But I personally, I wouldn't consume it as food unless it's mixed with some other protein or some other food to limit that insulinogenic response. So yeah, that would be my response. And most of the rural areas that I've seen that actually do make cheese, I don't think they consume the whey. I've only seen it being fed to animals, to be honest. So it seems like even the local population, the rural population that does do that, it already knows that whey by itself is it's not good to be used as food only by itself.
Sweet. This will be one of the last ones. Yanni says nutrition is good and active cyclist, but can't lose weight on. I think is this a Arimidex, a Nostrosol for 6 months,
Remidex, yeah.
and test for 2.5 ml daily cream prescribed. No success. No success. What to do?
Well, I would do some tests for thyroid function and cortisol. I mean, those are the things that would normally limit weight loss or prevent it from happening if estrogen is under control, and if the basically the food, if the dietary aspect is addressed as well. Something is keeping the fatty acid synthesis and the fat storage gets stored as fat instead of getting metabolized and burned as energy.
Okay, Georgie. Parting words.
Parting words.
Oh, just a minute.
Don't
Actually,
believe everything.
let me pause you. Okay, follow Georgie on Twitter, twitter.com/hate it. Go to idealabsdc.com. He has some boutique supplement products there. I do coaching via email and on Skype, and you can go to dannyroddy.com/resources or to patreon.com/dannyroddy and check that out. And also you can follow me on Telegram, which I feel like is a more like kind of direct communication from me to you guys. And also people are always kind of mystified when we go live and things. So if you don't follow YouTube, this is probably an easier way to do it. Okay, with that, Georgie, this Q&A episode was a miserable failure.
Although people would tell you stay healthy, but as we're starting to see right now, even this health crisis turns out to be a lot more manufactured than we thought before. Of course, there's a virus out there, but it looks like the biggest enemy is not the virus, but it's our response to it and the information that we're being fed about it from the public authorities. And if you pay close attention to the actual authorities and what they release in terms of information, you will see how their story changes over time, And eventually, even right now, as we speak, the official statement about the threat of this virus and the way it's evolving is actually pretty close to Dr. Pete's statements from about 2 weeks ago when everybody was freaking out. So just pay close attention to what the authorities are asking you to give up in return for some sort of a false sense of protection, considering that they're really not providing any of that. So just let's make sure this is not another 9/11, or at least not another excuse to give up liberties for a false promise of security.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is like, when has the government or the governing bodies ever cared about anybody's health? And the answer to that question is never. Like, they poisoned your food, they poisoned the air, they poisoned the water. Like, any kind of argument that comes from they're worried about some health crisis, in my opinion, falls completely flat. So maybe that makes
Let
me.
me rephrase this a little bit. Let's just put it this way: profit will always come first, even if they care about your health. First, they'll make sure that the profit has been made, and the structures that are in it for the profit have been taken care of, and only then our health will become an important an issue of concern.
More well put than I did. Okay, guys, thank you so much. Sincerely appreciate it. So I'll be back solo next week, hopefully, then Emma, then Georgie and Ray. Guys, thank you so much. Please like this episode. That does help. And please share it, because that's the only way anybody's ever going to see it. So, guys, thank you so much. Georgie Dinkov, idealabsdc.com. Thank you so much. You're amazing.
Thank you.
Okay,
it.
guys, have a great weekend. Talk to you guys soon, and take care.